We go through the day kind of putting on this facial mask of looking very interested or looking very serious or looking very friendly. But then when we come home, we need to relax and just be who we are.
Welcome to the Core Happiness Podcast. I'm your host, Kacee Banks, a mindset and positive psychology coach. On this podcast, we discuss all things related to creating happiness from within. So, let's do it. Welcome to the Core Happiness Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Lewis, a psychologist, author, and instructor of Tai Chi and Yoga. With a passion for storytelling, Dr. Lewis teaches tales to help people develop self-awareness, build relationships, and mindfully engage with the world around them. She has worked with individuals of all ages using stories as a powerful tool for learning and connection. In this episode, we are going to explore how storytelling can transform conversations, her four-step approach to meaningful connection, and the expanding spiral of communication across all generations. There will be a free resource for you, our listeners, from Dr. Lewis, so be sure to check out the show notes. So let's dive in. Dr. Lewis, welcome to the podcast. So happy to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. You have such a diverse background, and I'm so excited for this conversation because not only are you a psychologist, you are an author. It's like multifaceted, and I am so intrigued by that. What inspired you to integrate all these different disciplines to your work?
I've been interested in being a helping professional. And so for years I worked as a social worker and then continued my training to be a psychologist. After that, I got a postdoctorate in neuropsychology. I just like to learn. But in the process of that, I think part of it is that I observed that my mother was a very anxious person and an unhappy kind of person, unfulfilled, I guess. And I think that prompted me to work harder to find interests that I was enjoying. But I also did not want to be anxious. I did not want that to spill over into the world. So I began to practice meditation and I learned Tai Chi. So eventually I was working in a psychiatric hospital and observing that because I'm a physical person, as I would do therapy, I might walk with people and help them calm down as we're talking. And I began to realize that folks often when they're anxious don't work with their bodies. Their bodies are foreign to them, don't move in a comfortable way. And so I wanted to be able to teach them how to have control over at least something. They were committed to a hospital, they were on medications, they had people taking care of them, and I just felt that they needed to be more independent. And so that's when I got my teaching accreditations for Tai Chi, which I had been fascinated by for a long time, as well as yoga. And they absolutely helped me. And so I continue that, and I still teach Tai Chi. I teach gentler yoga than I used to as I've gotten older, but I use it every day.
That's beautiful. My father used to take a couple of classes, and he would say that it's very mind-body. It's more focused on the mind-body connection. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely, because it's moving energy, and we are energy, and the universe is energy. So as we draw that energy in, we move it through our energy centers and through our energy channels, and we can begin to experience that from a cognitive or a conscious point of view, but also from an emotional perspective. And it's just a wonderful practice. And I've actually used that with people who have had strokes, who have impaired movement, and helping them move their arms and focusing and just feeling that sense of energy moving through them, because it is gentle, but it's healing as well. It builds immune response. You got me started on something I'm just delighted with.
I think you're delighted about all the things we're going to talk about today, so that's good. Speaking of things that you are excited about, I know a lot of your writings focus on telling tales and storytelling.
Yes. Yes.
And I was hoping you could tell us what drew you to storytelling as a way to get people to connect.
Well, when you tell stories, people visualize what you're talking about. They visualize the characters and the scenes, and they hear the language and they hear words that maybe they haven't heard before. Kind of an example of that, when I think of stories, I think of my grandmother who lived next door to me, and she was of Welsh background, very quiet, little baker, housekeeper woman. And I would run over there because I just like to escape and I like to chase her cat. And the cat didn't like me, so I would run after the cat and meet my grandmother on the back porch, and she would invite me to a swing on the front porch with the cat. And we would swing, and she would calm the cat, and she would calm her little granddaughter. But she would tell stories about her background, and she would use these terms like flibberty-gibbet, a cattywampus, and these Welsh words that I found to be fascinating. And so I always wanted her to tell me something about those words. So to me, stories have related to me to comfortable times, to times when I was very much loved and soothed by my grandmother, but also my extended family. I had a nice extended family. And the idea of stories is that we all tell stories. That's what makes us human, because we can relate our histories in a way that animals can't. Words also can be magical. The emotions related to those words and the situations help us to develop a sense of how we relate to the world and how we relate to other people. And so it presents us with a non-threatening way of expressing ourselves without having to tell something specific about our background or a problem we had that day. We can relate to it in another way, but in that way we can learn how to problem solve and how to think through things, which helps build, particularly children, helps build their confidence and their problem solving in that regard without it being so threatening. Now we can talk about a bullying situation in a story. And the child doesn't have to relate to us how they were bullied that day and how that made them cry and one of their friends just teased them about that. We can relate to them with this story, and they can talk about, I didn't like that bully. I wish that he would have done this or that, and I would never want to be his friend again. And it's a little bit more abstract. And so that gives an opportunity to talk and relate in a way that's non-threatening, but very meaningful.
Yeah, and it sounds like, especially the example with the child and the bullying, it sounds like storytelling can be a way to tap into that self-awareness.
Absolutely.
Also, of how you're feeling.
Without saying, what did you do, or how did you deal with that? But let's talk about this bully. What do you think should happen with this situation? It gives a way to be a little bit farther removed so that you're not so caught up in the emotions. You can relate to the emotions, but you're not so caught up in them that you freeze. Which is what we do when we get anxious or scared or stressed.
I know the example was with a child and bullying, but is this something for all ages, like with storytelling and the connection?
Oh, I think so, yeah. Okay. I mean, I think we relate to myths. I'm sure you've heard of the ugly duckling story.
Yes.
And that idea that sometimes we don't fit into a group, and the group makes us really aware that we don't fit in. And yet, that doesn't mean that we don't fit in with other groups. And it's a matter of continuing on until we find that group or that commonality that makes us feel comfortable and recognized and accepted.
When you talk about problem solving and conflicts and maybe in resolving conflicts, is storytelling successful? And I know you said the word removed, but is it sort of to help with emotional regulation in terms of being able to convey how you're feeling without self-censoring?
Certainly. Yeah. And one of the ways in the book I've written, Do You Know How to Talk with Your Young Child? One of the ways that I look at censoring is by using that 4-step approach that I talk about, where if you can engage a child in a conversation, if you can really set an intention to talk with your child at least 20 minutes a week, but certainly more than that would be wonderful. But that quiet, special time where you and the child are just together, that you do 2 things that are really important. One is that you get rid of the wiggles. And I don't mean wiggles for just the child, I mean wiggles for the adult as well, because we build up tension. We go through the day kind of putting on this facial mask of looking very interested or looking very serious or looking very friendly. But then when we come home, we perhaps need to relax our face and just be who we are. We need to lower our shoulders because most of us are sitting and texting like this for a lot of the day, and so we might need to stretch our legs or whatever part of our bodies have been stressed during the day. Little ones have been running, jumping, playing, rolling around in the dirt, and so they too need to get the wiggles out. And so part of the fun of that special time is just doing some type of stretching. And it could be just like a yoga crescent where we stretch each arm over and stretch a couple of times, whatever it is. Then the focus attention. And this is where so much media, the phone dinging, the text, the computer calling our name in some way, social media. We have shortened our attention spans. Social media is grand in lots of ways, but our attention spans are pulled in a variety of directions. And so really being able to work on attention span for just a moment helps that child or helps that adult be able to turn off those things and do some deep breathing. And it can be as simple as breathing down into the belly, up into the chest, holding that for 4 counts, and then releasing the chest, releasing the belly, squeezing the belly in so that the diaphragm releases toxins, and holding it out for a few counts and doing that a few times. And then even setting an intention after you've done that. That's a way of being able to cope with talking and problem solving in a way that's non-threatening and in a way that's genuine. The one thing that I talk about in that whole process of the 4 steps is to make that a delight, to make that a special time.
And I know you mentioned the 4-step approach to conversing and connecting that you developed. Could you actually take us through what those 4 steps are?
Sure. The first one would be the stretching. And so in the book, I have several different stories. And so with each one, I have different stretches and different breathing techniques to focus attention. So the stretching would be the first one, to release muscle tension and to release the tension and the stress of the day. And then it looks like you can relate to that, and so can I. It's like,
I think a lot of people can.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially since the pandemic and a lot of people are working remotely and working at home. I hear a lot where The decompression time that you would normally have at the end of the day just isn't there anymore. So I think a lot of people are struggling with that. I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Well, I agree with you. And it's interesting because I used to drive about 10 miles to work and 10 miles back, and that let me release tension. But if traffic was heavy, my shoulders would come up around my ears and my hands would be on the steering wheel gripped for a while. And so then I would need to stretch my fingers and stretch my shoulders and stretch my neck. And so those are the kinds of things that I would do in that first step. And the second step would be then, let's just focus our attention. And by that, I think about the term mindfulness that we hear so much, and it can become meaningless when we hear a term repeatedly. But when I think about mindfulness, I think about being totally in the spot where we're in. We are paying attention to the person who's in front of us. We're paying attention to our own feelings. We're not thinking about what happened 10 minutes ago or yesterday. We're not thinking about what we're going to do tomorrow. We're not thinking about the text that just dinged on the phone or anything. We're right there. And it could be that in that step, we would do a deep breathing and we would just sink into the soles of our feet and just, but the real intention is to just let go of those. And then building that quiet space might be to not have a set space that's set aside, but that it's quiet, the TV is off, there aren't any machines calling your name. And so that becomes a really rewarding place where you're just paying attention to talking. And then the stories that I write typically are tales. And by that I mean that they set up a situation, and most of them have animals in them, and the animals talk or communicate with us in some way. They're setting up a situation like friendship, forgiveness, taking responsibility, being assertive, dealing with jealousy, things like that. And so they're just kind of general themes, setting the groundwork, the description, the visual ideas, the characters, and how they might feel. Is there a problem? How would you deal with that problem? And so when we talk about the step about communicating, we're telling the story and we're communicating by using open-ended questions. We're communicating by not asking why, because when we ask why questions, that can make someone feel defensive. Mm-hmm. And so we ask, can you just tell me more about that? What else were you thinking about in regard to that? But with the communication, you're listening with your body. Now, by that I mean that you listen with your eyes. You look at that person and how they're responding to you. Are they comfortable? Are they anxious? Are they jittery? You listen with your ears. You hear their voice tone, their volume, what they're saying in the pauses when they're not saying anything. You hear the rhythm of their voice. Is it slow and dull and worried? You listen with your heart. By that I mean that you project and feel that love and acceptance and interest in somebody who's different from you, even though they're your child, loved one, or they're your employee. You're listening because they're very different and they have different experiences from you every single moment. Mm. And in your eyes, you let them know that you really care about them and want to hear what they have to say. You also listen with your positioning, your posture, you want to look interested, so you want to be relaxed, but you might lean forward if you want to hear the person if they're speaking quietly, or if you both feel comfortable, you might want to be close and touch hands or touch one another lightly. It depends on the relationship that you have. And so those are ways that I think about that third step of communication. The fourth step is simply engaging and willing to share something about how you see the story or how you're interested in their answers and what that might be like. That's the engagement, and the engagement is a long-term process that building over time the respect and the trust in one another. And you want to be able to allow people that you interact with to trust you, and you want them to know that you respect them and respect their thoughts. If you disagree, you can disagree, it's fine, but you both are different people and you might not see things the same way. Those are basically the 4 steps.
And step 2, when it's more like crafting the story, do you feel that everybody can craft a story, that everybody can be a storyteller? And I asked that because when I was working in advertising earlier in my career, that's kind of what people always try to get to the story. What's the story we're trying to tell? And sometimes people would be like, I don't really have a story. I'm not a good storyteller. And when listening to those 4 steps, it seems like anybody could have a story, or anybody can craft that story in terms of a connection. And I was wondering what your take is on that. Do you feel that anybody can tell a story, or what makes a good story that helps with connection?
I think being genuine is certainly a big deal. And so I think that people can tell stories in the sense that they can relate, even if they can't craft and develop a story on their own. They can find stories that have themes in them that might be helpful for a conversation or for a business proposition or what have you. So you don't have to be a very creative person. I think you can find stories that might relate. And that can be very helpful and very powerful. But there are marvelous stories in every culture that hit on those emotional themes that people have across cultures. They use different language, they use different characters, but the themes are similar. And I think we can use those and be very powerful in that regard.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you gave that as an example, because I actually was going to ask you, when we're thinking about the 4 steps, how they can be applied to strengthen, whether it's personal relationships, whether it's work relationships, family, friends. Can those steps be applied in all of those situations?
I think that the stretching, if you're going to a cocktail party and you don't know anybody, you can buzz in the bathroom and just stretch and release that tension and take a few nice breaths and say, I can do this. I can calm down and I can relate to people because I am going to mindfully go in that room and I am going to relate to a few people and I am going to pay attention to them. I'm going to listen with my whole body. I'm going to perhaps even tell a little story about my day. And so it gives me a way to converse, but it's not magic and it's not hokey. It's being real with the person that you're in front of. One of the examples that I give in my book, it feel like it's a gift. And I'm sure you've had this situation yourself where you've engaged in a conversation with somebody and you feel like you are the only person in the room because that person is attending to you and they're interested and they're asking relevant questions, but they're really focused on interacting with you as an interesting, different person than they themselves are. And it is a wonderful experience and very memorable because we don't always get that. We have people talking to us and they're looking to see who else is in the room. So I think it's such a gift to be able to do that. And I think it is absolutely something that can be done by people in social settings, in professional settings. And I think that when we do that in a professional setting, the employee who never really settles and never really pays attention, they're just busy thinking about where they need to go next or what's on their desk. They're not really interacting individually with the people in their meeting or with their supervisor or with their colleagues or their supervisees. And so I think it's very appropriate for that.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, how does it work in today's world where we are living in such a digital world and the face-to-face interaction is not as frequent as it used to be? How do we still foster these principles to form these genuine connections?
It's interesting. That's a challenge to me. But it's interesting as I write now because I was used to working for 30, 40 years where I could walk down the hallway and see my colleagues and talk to them and problem solve. But now that I'm writing and I have begun to interact with groups of writers online, and they're from all over, they make an effort to show up, share what they're doing, ask what other people are doing and give or take advice. I have to take a lot of advice because I'm new to this. It can be done, but it takes attention, just turning off the text and things like that so that you're not drawn away to other things while you're trying to connect online is important, I think.
I agree. I think it's definitely challenging, but it can be done with effort. I've noticed that even something in terms of giving the space and the patience to hear someone's story and not make judgments or assumptions, even if it's through text, social media, or a video call or something like that. I know we're in this world of instant gratification and we like to rush things, and so we make assumptions when somebody's talking or assume what point they're trying to make before they even say a point. And so I think in the digital world it's good to just be patient and present, like you're saying, and just mindful of paying attention and not trying to rush. And I think that's difficult for some people, but I think with some effort that can definitely help with fostering those relationships and connection, because you're actually listening and responding appropriately to what you've listened to as opposed to what you think someone's going to say or what you think someone wants to hear.
Yeah, that idea that there's a sender and a receiver. The sender has a message and the receiver hears a message. But the receiver might not have heard the message the sender was sending. The sender's responsibility is to check and make sure that the message was received as intended. Or the receiver can check and say, is this what you meant? And that's what you were describing, but it's not verbal. It's not face to face. And so many, I think, disagreements started or hurt feelings or whatever through email because some people aren't real good at expressing what they really mean by writing. But I think that reflective receiving information is really important. And as you say, it takes time. But the time is worth it because we want to communicate effectively. See, in your core happiness program, you want people to be happy with themselves and with other people. That takes time. If we just take for granted that whatever the person said they meant, we could get a whole lot of difficulty with that, hurt feelings and miscommunication altogether.
I want to go back to that because I'm hoping you can explain more about the concept of expanding the spiral of communication and relationships and how that can be effective in our day-to-day lives.
It's just a term that I thought of as I was talking about communication, and that listening to people as if they're unique, as if they're a person that you've never met before. Maybe they're from a different planet and you're really interested in how they think and what they say and what they eat for dinner and whatnot. And so when you do that, you're showing that person that you really respect their uniqueness, as you're willing to do the reflective listening that we talked about, either in terms of writing or in hearing. We are actually building trust and respect. We're respecting them, they're respecting our fairness. They can trust us because if we misunderstand, we're going to check with them. But over time, it can build, because if that person who's listening misunderstands, but they're willing to hear a clarification, that begins to build trust. If you misunderstood them and you're clarifying that, you're helping them to solve their problems in listening and communicating. And so you're giving them more language to use. For example, for a young child, or maybe for a new employee, you're giving them more language to use that's more fine-tuned to that industry, that market that they're working in. And so that builds that sense of trust, and it helps them build confidence.
I love the fact that it's touching on building trust. I think that is the foundation of any successful relationship. I'm wondering, for anyone who's struggling with connection, whether it's with a family member, a friend, a colleague, what is one small but yet powerful step that they could take today to help with that?
I think the one small step would be to take that deep belly breath just before interacting. Let that sink through the soles of the feet so that person is grounded, their lungs are getting rid of toxins, their brain is nourished with oxygen, and then they can say, I am ready to work on this. Because if they are present, there's a far greater chance that some understanding will be reached than if they go in and they're so tense that they want to run away, or they're saying to themselves all of those catastrophic thoughts that, oh no, this is not going to go well. We never get along. This person never understands me. And so that makes it so, because they're only there in a difficult situation in their mind's eye. So if they can calm and they can be grounded, they have a much better chance of relating effectively.
That's beautiful. I love that, because I think so many people anxiety is a big thing nowadays.
Indeed.
I mean, we just are living in a world where there are a lot of things that people are anxious about, and rightfully so. But I think that is very important, because I think a lot of us, because there's just so much anxiety, there's overwhelm, stress, we are often in a more closed off state than we usually would be. And so when we have that centering breath and we are grounding ourselves, I think that opens us up to receive. So
I agree.
If somebody is communicating, we're able to receive better. And I think that we're able to communicate better because we're coming more from a place of calm, like you've said. So I think that that's beautiful. One of the things that I wanted to talk about, I know we talked about this a little bit, but you created a free resource for the listeners to download, which was the Relating Effectively with Your Child. And we talked about it a little bit at the beginning of the episode, but I wanted to bring it up again because I know that some people they struggle connecting with their children. And I know we talked a little bit about things that they could do in terms of the connecting and play and quiet times, like going through those 4 steps. But can you take us through just some common communication mistakes that you have seen parents make with their children that should just be cautious to avoid?
Well, it's interesting. In that little handout that folks can get, it talks about 3 different ways of parenting. And one of them is the authoritative parent who is, it's my way or the highway. And one of them is that parent who wants to be a friend with the child and doesn't create any boundaries at all, which can be equally as devastating. And the third type, which is the one where children are most in school, they get better grades, they have better social skills and whatnot, is that parent who has some clear boundaries, but they are very loving and they expect their child to talk with them about the boundaries and understand them, but they're not punitive, and they're again that parent who talks and understands what their child is dealing with and who they are. Actually, they're not the little me who will do exactly as I say. I know a lot of young parents who have children maybe in elementary to middle school, and they're deeply trying, but they work a full-time job and they have a child or 2 or more, and they believe that everything that their child wants to do and things that other people's children want to do should be what they're involved in. Many dance groups, sports teams, other kinds of clubs and things. And so what happens is that every evening they're picking up their child from school and they're running them to an event, and then they're driving through a fast food restaurant, eating dinner in the car, and then they come home and they do a bit of homework and the child has a bath and goes to bed. That's well-meaning, and it's okay. I think children really need to expand their ability and understand what they like to do and what they're good at. But for parents, I think that one is one that if they can slow down, and again, just because there are all these things that are available, maybe we need to take some time to interact with them and let them relax, teach them some ways of relaxing and being calm and thinking critically and planning some little projects that they would do. That's another part of the book. Planning some projects that a parent would do with a child at home. Maybe it's just drawing a picture of one of the characters in their story that you're going to hang on the refrigerator. What materials do you want? What kind of paper will you use? Maybe one of them is about a bird, and so, I wonder what it would be like to put a bird feeder out. What would we need for that? Can we make a bird feeder? So that, again, we begin to help that child begin critical thinking, which is a way of planning something, cooperating with somebody, organizing materials, follow through. Follow through is a big deal in critical thinking. And it's not as receptive as just going and being on a team where maybe you don't play very well anyway and you sit on the bench, but you're just there, because it's something that other people are doing. So again, it's like thinking about the child as an individual and helping them develop these individual skills that might be very helpful to them in the future.
Yeah. And then you also have another book coming out in a couple of months, I think, don't you? That's focused on self-help
Yes.
for techniques for caregivers as well.
Yeah, I do. Thank you for reminding me. The working title is Beat or Retreat, and that's kind of a tongue-in-cheek kind of thing for me to use, but I might use it in the title, where people who are caregivers, maybe for children, maybe for unhealthy family members or for elderly family members, have a full-time consideration And it's stressful because not only are they dealing with their own issues, but they're dealing with a lot of other issues for another person, at least one other person, maybe a couple. And then they're also dealing with the possibilities of what might happen if they fail. So there's also that self-critical piece. But they don't have time to go to a retreat center. They don't have the money, possibly,
Right.
because worrying about healthcare costs and things like that. And so the B to retreat is ways of, on a daily basis, choosing these self-help kinds of things, like some of the exercises from yoga and Tai Chi and Qigong that are soothing. Maybe not a full practice, but things that one could do and repeat that just, they feel so good. Or different ways of breathing that can relax when one is worried. Self-massage that can be used on hands and feet, particularly neck, scalp, but they're also wonderful to share with the person you're caring for. Those are some issues. Some skin care, just a variety of things. These are things that I've written about in my blogs over the years to give people ways of, well, meditation and visualization, a gratitude journal or just a variety of things like that. But those kinds of ways of bringing joy into your life in an inexpensive way that doesn't take you through the airport, and you don't need a passport, and you don't need a chunk of money to pay for in advance, and you don't need to get vacation time off. That's the tongue-in-cheek kind of beta retreat kind of
love that.
title.
I know a lot of people can benefit from techniques like that, so that's fantastic. Do you have any key message or powerful message that you would like to leave our listeners with?
Again, I just go back to that gift of treating each person that you encounter, a store clerk, a guy who's pushing all the carts in from Costco or wherever, greeting that person as if they're special, unique, and just finding that when you do that, you get greeted back the same way. It's just lovely. And it's such a gift and it's such a surprise because so many times when we're out and about, we feel invisible. And so we can do with total strangers as well as people we really care for. And it brings us joy.
Dr. Lewis, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me, Kacee. I really appreciate it.
To our Core Happiness listeners, all of Dr. Lewis's contact information will be listed in the show notes, as well as a link to the free download, as well as her upcoming book. I thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed this podcast, please feel free to rate it or leave a review. If you have any thoughts or questions, I would love to hear from you. You can email podcast@corehappiness.com. For show notes and additional resources, you can visit www.corehappiness.com. As always, please remember, never let anyone diminish your light. Until next time, sending you my love.